So it's pretty much confirmed now that the automotive industry in the UK is screwed. And in terms of heavy industry, there's a potential that, well, rail might be the next group of businesses to go. This comes from Andrew O'Donis. The rail disaster will be next. After Honda's recent decision to close its Swindon car plant, the former Transport Secretary says that the rail industry will follow. Honda this week gave its 350,000 staff the same notice of closure 2 years ago as the UK gave of its intention to leave the UK. 2 years seems to be the going rate for deliberately planning an economic and social catastrophe. It takes much longer to build afresh. Witness the experience of the Japanese investment into the UK over 30 years of Honda's operations in Swindon. I speak from personal knowledge as the Transport Secretary who a decade ago helped persuade Hitachi, arguably the world's greatest modern train builder, to construct their highly successful train factory in Newton Attercliffe in the County Durham, and to locate the headquarters of Hitachi Rail Europe, note the title, in London. The business opportunity was twofold. The British government was seeking to place a huge order for new trains to replace the Intercity 125s built by the British Rail in the mid-1970s, and the European train market was beginning to be open to competition thanks to the EU. This raised the prospect of Hitachi being able to challenge the effective duopoly of Germany's Siemens and the French Alstom, the two giants which last year tried to merge in order to resist competition, but have just been refused by this, and yes, by the EU. Hitachi's initial preference was to build Britain's new high-speed trains largely in Japan. I made this clear to all the bidders that wanted their trains to be built, that wanted their trains only if built in the UK. These were entirely overseas companies because the British train manufacturing had collapsed in the 1980s and 90s. There was a long prehistory. Hitachi had built the new Javelin trains operating in Kent's new high-speed line, and these were coming into service when I took office, and this impressed me. As did Hitachi's assembly plant in Ashford. Hitachi saw this as their initial entry into the UK market, but most of the design and much of the construction was done in Japan. The real issue was whether they would want to make a much deeper commitment to R&D and manufacture in the UK. I find myself conducting a one-man industry policy to succeed for the three interlocking reasons which go to the heart of Brexit. First, Hitachi drew on the successful experience of the Japanese car manufacturers in the UK. A choice for County Durham for their factory was directly influenced by Nissan's presence in the Sunderland since the 1980s, with its dense web of supply chains and local connections. Second, Hitachi and the Japanese government, which became a party to the discussions, were persuaded by the British government that what it said about long-term investment, the fact that I was the minister taking forward the plans for the HS2 on a cross-party basis helped. And third, Hitachi and the Japanese state saw this as an opportunity to enter the European market, not just the British, not just in rail. Hitachi also set up UK plants for wind turbine and nuclear energy. Britain's membership of the EU was indispensable. I cannot exaggerate the importance of the Japanese being treated with courtesy, respect and consistency. The moment my policy nearly came to grief was when David Cameron suddenly announced he might not honour the new train contract if he won the 2010 elections. In the event he did, and we nearly lost Hitachi. Since then, Brexiteers say that Honda's withdrawal has nothing to do with Brexit, and the proof is that what the company has said in public is pure rubbish. The Japanese are far too polite to blame their hosts, but the only significant thing that has changed in the 6 months since Honda were definitely staying in Swindon, to the immense and even worsening prospect of Brexit, not least the promises made to the Japanese government by Theresa May 2 years ago have not been honoured. Oh, and look what else has announced that they are leaving the UK or scaling back in the last 6 months. Nissan and Hitachi. So this is another Japanese company that is potentially going to leave. And I agree with Andrew Adonis. If you know and you've been to Japan, the whole thing of, Japanese would never ever upset their host or insult their host in any way, shape or form. So this is being done by them from a purely cultural standpoint. They don't want to blame Brexit because they know that it will upset their hosts. And by doing that, they're essentially leaving. You've seen now, again, as mentioned, Hitachi there, a big train producer, is pulling back. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, but what about that trade agreement? Isn't it all being moved to Japan? And that's the reason why it's being done? No, my friends, no. Here's the thing. Just because Japan has a trade agreement with the EU doesn't mean that these companies will not benefit still, if anything even more, than being in Europe and having jobs in Europe. Not only that, companies and governments, the governments themselves can still offer incentives for these companies to stay where they are and improve. Not only that, these Honda plants that are shutting down, it's kind of funny that people said, oh no, they're only closing down because there's a shift in the market. Well, hold on then. If Honda want to stay, and they were serious about staying, they would invest and they would put some serious investment into this plant in Sunderland to be able to change it to keep up with the times. That is entirely possible, but they do not want to make that investment because of us, and when we are leaving the single market. Theresa May has, as I said at the end of the article, made promises to the Japanese government. Theresa May has not kept those promises. So it is no surprise that we are seeing a continuous flood of Japanese companies just up sticks and leaving the UK completely or moving into Europe.